Hey guys, welcome back to New Athens Project podcast. This is episode 9.
Yeah, we're closing on episode 10.
Yeah, we've been really busy, going all over the place. We got to meet Brian Harrison, Texas State Representative earlier this month, and really encouraging to hear all the work that he's doing in Austin, exposing the lies and some really fishy things that are happening in the Texas House of Representatives.
Texas Senate, all of it. And Austin right now, he exposed some really deep, dark stuff about kind of just where the Republican Party in Texas sits right now, and just how we as voters have not really paid attention. And that's really going to come into play a lot more as we get closer to November. We'll talk more about that, specifically how it ties to James Tallarico. But speaking of James Tallarico, we're planning on having a series coming up soon where we address several of his different things. We'll do a multi-part series on addressing James Tallarico's lies, and specifically how they are lies to the church today and why they are being scriptures being twisted by James Tallarico. That being said, today's topic, what are we talking about?
Talking about socialism, and does it work, or has it ever worked?
Well, if any of you guys have been paying any attention to the news, you've been hearing a little bit about the Democratic Socialists of America and their big push to. They have been racking up wins all across the country, specifically in the Northeast. Zohar Mamdani was elected, an openly Democratic Socialist. They just recently passed a Democrat in the Minnesota primary, Abdul Al-Sayed. And we also there was another person, I believe, in Oregon who won a local state seat, who was another Muslim endorsed by the Democratic Socialists of America. And so, real quick, we're just going to go to what Democratic Socialism, there's a difference between socialism and Democratic Socialism, so we will give them that step. But just generally, historically, we do know that Democratic Socialism either devolves into socialism or it becomes capitalism again, and people jerk back to the right. Now, Sawyer, could you give them a brief definition of what socialism is?
Yes, so
based on like Wikipedia, just general definitions we should all be able to agree on.
So basically, socialism is an economic and political system where the community or the government owns and controls the major means of production, like factories, land, basically all these things that should be private, but those private things that should be owned by individuals are no longer yours.
Right.
They're the government's possession. They have access to it. You don't have a say over that. What capitalism protects is your freedom to have that private property or that business or your factory or your tools or whatever. But what socialism is it takes away that freedom. It takes away that right.
Right, and it doesn't just apply to government. It can be a communal setting. So socialism can be applied with the idea of collectivism, which is something Mamdani is pushing right now. It's that, hey, we should all be getting it's essentially this really big question, which we're going to be trying to answer throughout the show. Not only does socialism work, but even deeper than that, do we believe life should be fair? And they're actually very tightly intertwined when you think about it, because should everyone get the same income, the same benefits, the same outcome as everybody else? Like, is that how the way society has ever functioned or will ever function? This side of, honestly, as Christians, we believe those who confess in their mouth and believe in their heart that Jesus has raised from the dead, they will be saved, and ultimately they will be faithful, and in the end they will be granted eternal life. And that's the gift all who have confessed will receive. Now, does that mean that therefore everybody gets the exact same reward in eternity? Even socialism, ironically, you'll hear the term. Ronald Reagan said socialism works in heaven. If you actually think about it, there's a rewards-based rewards system in eternity, which I don't want to get into the super deep theology of how everybody understands that, but there does appear scripturally, there's evidence that there's rewards in the eternal realm that are reflected based on how we lived this life. And I don't know how, there's questions about how that looks, and it obviously won't look necessarily won't be like monetization, but we all do know that it's kind of interesting that even eternity and the rewards we receive in eternity kind of go against the socialist idea. So, sorry, one of the questions that we're seeing is, centralized collective wealth. Like everybody can get Medicare for all, free groceries, taxing the rich, offsetting disparities. what would you say is really the big problem with that? Knowing that, okay, hey, sorry, you and I both I make $200,000 a year, you make $50,000 a year. What if I just gave you, 75,000 of mine income, and then we both had 125,000? What's wrong with that?
So first of all, our premise is already broken. Basically, what we do is we rely on government for healthcare.
Exactly.
Which is the first problem. Now, if you want to go specifically of like who all deserves, welfare and all the healthcare issues, ultimately, as Christians, we believe that healthcare is a good thing, and everybody should have access to it. And in reality, that's what we have today in America. Everyone has access to that, and that's what capitalism promotes.
Right.
But here's the problem with what we have today. We have taken this idea of, well, yes, you're more what would I say, vulnerable, so therefore we should just give you access without any laws helping. Basically, how could you sum this up, Corey? I'm trying to find the words.
Even without giving any guidelines, it's the idea that, hey, because of X circumstance or X scenario, you get X, Y, and Z privilege. And that's
that's actually a good point, because a lot of what I see is because, here's what sometimes I hear, because you're black or because you're Muslim, you get these welfares without having any,
it's like guidelines, parameters, and again, I think it seems to have a little bit less to do with the parameters around getting this welfare. It's more of like, hey, I personally want health care, and instead of saying, hey, I work, I make $50,000 and I know it's low income, but it's going to cost me, $300 a month to pay for my premium. Instead of going, hey, insurance companies should be charging less for their rates, because of, obviously, we understand Big Pharma is making a killing on Medicare right now and all that stuff, and we know that it's also happening at the government level, and we're all tired of it. We should be paying $10,000 to spend overnight at the doctor's office, or spend overnight at the hospital. It doesn't cost us that much. The idea that, hey, everybody should get equal distribution is not at all biblical. Biblically, you reap what you sow.
Of course, we all think we should have the same access.
Right. Everybody. That's the idea of freedom is, everybody has the access to opportunity and wealth, and everybody has the access to that. Everybody has the opportunity for that. Equal. That's what the difference between equal opportunity and equal outcome is. Equal opportunity says we all have start at the starting line, but only some of us will finish, and only some of us will finish first. That's not saying, oh, simply because I'm a white Christian male, I'm going to cross that finish line. That has nothing to do with it. It has everything to do with my work ethic and my willingness to go and earn and strive after the things that I know in this life matter. And making sure my family's fed, making sure I have an income to keep a roof over our heads, making sure I have health care so I can take my kids to the doctor if they get sick.
Right, and that kind of goes back to that point of, which is another part of centralized wealth, taxing the rich. So basically what that is regardless of how much you make or how much you work, everyone gets the same income, basically.
So if I make $200,000 a year and Sar makes $50,000, I would give him $75,000 of mine, and we both make $125,000. What's like in Sar's mind? What's the problem with that?
Like, I didn't work for that.
That's the automatic problem. Yeah. I worked for $200,000. I made an income of $200,000, and it's being diverted to Sire.
So biblically,
via government or via a communal system that's been set up, which will ultimately has historically proven to become government.
Right. So I want to bring a Bible verse up about this specific area. I was talking with a coworker, and we were talking about this issue of working and all the political issues, and specifically this issue. But I brought up to him the verse. And I believe it's Proverbs, but it says, if a man doesn't work, he doesn't eat. And Boom. So, number one, you have that verse to say, you earn what you work for, basically. So it's really simple. It's not supposed to be this idea of, it's very unbiblical to think that, well, he didn't work at all last year, but he should get the same income as
a guy who worked his hiney off.
Exactly, a farmer. And
or a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Just because they're a CEO of a Fortune 500 company does not mean they didn't work their tail off to get there.
And also going off of that, what sounds right? Just very surface level. What sounds right about taking 50% of the income of a rich or a wealthy, hardworking citizen, regardless of race or background? What seems right about taking 50% of their income and giving it to someone who doesn't work for it at all? That's just not, there's no instance where that is fair at all.
Now, the counter to that would be, well, the person is struggling to get by. They're an immigrant, a Somali immigrant coming in from Somalia, and they have nothing. They come and start completely fresh. They're starting at the starting line where this American citizen who makes $300,000 a year doesn't have the same starting point. They're already built up into and they're a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. That's not even the same comparison. So basically, the complaint about socialism is, why does there appear to be disparity and inequality in the system? Because some people are entering into the system and not willing to work. And I'm not saying everybody who is currently in the system who's on welfare is not willing to work. What I'm saying is, there's a consistent pattern, specifically with immigrants, and 81% of Somali immigrants in Minnesota, by the way, recently found out, who do not work. They live off welfare. Their work is breaking the system. So the idea that the Fortune 500 company owner who worked his entire life, again, this is a hypothetical scenario, but it is very true in a lot of contexts, who work your entire life to get to a certain hierarchical structure in the capitalist system, therefore should divert half of his income he's spent his life earning to someone who is coming in unwilling to work and is benefiting off of his tax dollars anyways, should get an additional 50% of his income. That is not only unjust, it is not fair. That is not fair.
And they portray it as something that is fair.
That's the portrayal. The portrayal is that it is fair to give someone who has a lesser circumstance, a lesser income because of whatever idea they come up with.
And that propaganda has led so many people to think that socialism and democratic socialism is good.
Yes. So real quick, as we talked about that, you understand, socialism, centralized collective wealth, it's not really about fairness, right? We understand that. Now, what is the next step? So you have democratic socialism, which is where a lot of America is at and wanting today. We're seeing that across the country. Democratic socialism, obviously, we've just dispelled the socialist part of it, so you just have democracy left. So America has two choices. You can either be democratic or you can be socialist. So what does socialism breed, Czar? Think historically. I know you have a book in front of you that's really important.
Yeah, so I've referred to this book in our podcast before. It's by Erwin Lutzer. It's called When a Nation Forgets God, 7 Lessons We Must Learn from Nazi Germany. This is about Nazi Germany and how the downfall of Nazi Germany was sparked by, you guessed it, socialism. So,
ding, ding, ding.
That's a very surface level look at that book. But one of the specific issues is how
government control.
Yes, exactly. Government control in really every area, including schools, private property, all these different areas, some of which we've mentioned so far. But in this book, Erwin Lutzer does expose all of these issues. And number one, something that's, for the record, just a side note, Mein Kampf is basically one of your foundation books for socialism. If you're ever wondering how or why it got started, Mein Kampf is kind of a starting point for that.
Mein Kampf,
anything by Marx.
Yeah, anything by Karl Marx.
Yeah,
all of it. It's super obvious.
But yeah, that was just a side note. But anyways, yeah, going back to government control and socialism, that has never worked in a historical history. It just has never worked.
USSR, Nazi
Germany, Iran, basically, even England. It wasn't technically socialism per se. It was monarchy.
Yeah.
But
which is essentially communism at that point.
Exactly. And like you're saying, several aspects of socialism and communism were part of that monarchy where, why did we even flee England in the first place? We left because we didn't have freedom to practice our religion, number one. And two, we just didn't want the government to be all in our faces and be all in our private lives.
Which on a note, I will say there is an element today, even with the conservative government we have in place right now. I think we all still want less government. That Brian Harrison.
Agreed.
Going back to Brian Harrison, he says something very. His big phrase he's saying now is, "I want government to be as irrelevant to our lives as humanly possible," and that is not happening right now. Let's face it, I'm a huge Trump supporter. I think their administration has done so much work to undo the mush of the swamp that's there, but we need to do more. We need to keep cutting back government. We need to keep removing the footprint of government structures in our lives. More freedom. We need more freedom as individuals. We don't need more control. We don't need more centralized power. We need decentralized power, less systems to be submitted to that are not godly.
Well, think about it. We left England for, number one, their tyranny, but we also created our government to protect our rights as Americans. The government was not supposed to be this tyrannical or monarchical setup, which is what we left from.
Or all-giving welfare system.
Exactly. It's not our end-all, be-all, and it's not our savior.
That's God's job.
Exactly.
And
the government that was set up by Christians, by the way, that government was set up to protect our rights. And yes, it is flawed. The laws are not perfect. We're in a broken world. Of course, that's just a given. But this government was designed to protect our rights as private citizens, as citizens and individuals who own private property, who have private businesses. Government cannot get in your way if the Constitution is standing.
Exactly. And that comes back to, again, like I was saying, our system is so far overreaching already. Like that we have codes now when we build buildings and all those things, right? Which, again, not all of them are terrible. But if you look at it, you go that those are just other areas where government has continued to encroach upon private life. We have codes, we have specific documentation we got to fill out to go to certain places. There's aspects of it's like all this extra red tape that wasn't there when the founders designed this. And everyone is a little step closer to socialism if you think about it. Everyone's a little step closer to communism. And we'll talk about communism in a later episode because it's really going to be the dividing line come November and definitely into 2028. Who we're voting for will essentially be the line between capitalism and socialism, or capitalism and communism, freedom and bondage. It really is going to be that cut and dry. It's becoming that cut and dry as we're watching the Democratic Party kind of get culled through. And this is kind of the final thing we want to touch on. If you're a young person listening to this, if you're hearing what we're saying, like you guys are totally wrong or whatever, if you think doesn't matter, look up the Democratic Socialists of America. They're kind of like, I want to say trending. They're on the uptrend right now politically. They are racking up win after win, like I said at the top. But there's something interesting I want you to understand about what they define as, their view. They say capitalism is a system designed by the owning class to exploit the rest of us for their own profit. That's their claim, right? We must replace it with democratic socialism, a system where ordinary people have a real voice in our workplaces. This is directly on their website, dsausa.org, where ordinary people have a real voice in our workplaces, neighborhoods, and society. Now, I'm going to skip down a little bit. This is interesting. We want a democracy powered by everyday people. So, pause for a second. What is capitalism?
Powered by the people.
A democracy powered by everyday people. Now, their claims is no, it's actually controlled by the working class because they set wages and all that. Who chooses what career they want? I want to be an electrician. Let's say. Let's take this as a hypothetical. I want to be an electrician. If I go work and start my own business, I could make $150,000 in 2 years. Be $150,000 in 2 years. But you have to be willing to work for it. Now,
that's capitalism.
That's capitalism. Or I could go work for an electrical company and start off and make $50,000 a year. In 2 years, I'm making $300,000 a year. That's capitalism. That's powered by the everyday person. That is the individual. Now, let's take a scenario. Let's say you're a Somali immigrant. You come into the system, and you see you have the ability to get on welfare.
I wouldn't work a day in my life.
Exactly.
It's free. I'm taking welfare.
If you could choose to not work and get on welfare,
and here's the thing.
Everybody would choose that.
If the law will not be enforced, and if I don't have consequences for it, I'm going to take welfare all day.
Exactly.
I don't have to work.
Oh, wait a second. Who pays for that welfare?
Well, American taxpayers, but I don't care. I get to live off of it.
Well, it honestly doesn't matter whether you care or not. The fact is, the taxation aspect is another aspect where, hey, we don't even have to have a socialist system. We're already paying for welfare for those who come in and are working the system. So if you're hearing what I'm saying, you're hearing kind of the logical end I'm taking this to. Right now, we are facilitating laziness as American people by paying tax dollars to our government. We're facilitating, as we've realized, fraud. We're facilitating decades-long fraud in our system. Like Minnesota, sorry, obviously that's happening. So Democratic Socialists of America want a democracy powered by everyday people, sorry. Dude, that's capitalism.
It's so oxymoronic. It's so oxymoronic because they're using the website that the wording on their website is they're saying they're defining capitalism, but they're saying, well, this is the democratic socialism.
Because their terms around it are different. Because basically, again, back to the outcome and opportunity difference, they want equal opportunity and equal outcome, which means we all have to link arms and make the exact same income and get the exact same benefit at the exact same price. That's just not how our system works. And I know there's several people out there, and again, I hope I haven't painted with a broad brush. I know there are people who live off welfare and stuff who need to be. There are people who are disabled, people who are mental incapacities, but there is a legitimate problem in our country. Statistically, you could look at it all across Minnesota as your blueprint, right? If it's happening in Minnesota, it's happening in California, all the things. New York. What is the problem, sorry, with people using welfare and not getting off welfare?
Well, because we pay for it. It's pretty simple. It's the people who are working for welfare, who earn it, end up being the ones giving it to the people who don't work for it, and that's
exactly
number one. That's just biblically just unjust from a surface level even. So if we're gonna look at it from a Christian worldview, it's obviously wrong. It's just unfair in every way.
Well,
now, to be honest, life is never fair. We have to say that.
That's the key.
But we can't. We'll say, well, because life is never fair, therefore you just have to, everybody has to be lumped into the same welfare and same opportunity, same outcome, and it's wrong in every way
God.
Biblically.
It's playing God, really, and it takes away the ability for humans to be godly. And this is where I want to tie it into kind of a more positive note, because we can talk about socialism and dunk on socialism all day long because it's easy. But really, the problem comes when we as Christians say, hey, I love my neighbor. This is a James Tallarico ad we recently saw, and we'll break this down a little bit more. He said, in a future episode, if you love your neighbor, you'll vote for me because you love your neighbor and you want to love those around you, right? It's like, well, yeah, I love my neighbor, so let me give my money and my income and my investments to the government, and they'll give it to other people for me. So what does that do? What does that remove? Sorry.
Generosity.
And?
Love.
Personal responsibility.
Yeah.
That takes away the individual person saying, hey, you know what? I made $100,000 this year. I'm going to take $100,000 extra dollars this year. I'm going to take $50,000. I'm going to give it to this ministry. I'm going to take $50,000 and just bless some random person anonymously. That takes away the individual's ability to go and just be a kind, Christ-like person in someone else's life. You just say, hey, government, you do it for me. It avoids all personal sacrifice and loss because it's already being done by the government. There's no responsibility for you.
Yeah, and I saw a statistic. I don't remember the exact number, but you might be able to pull this up somewhere, where conservatives are much more likely to be generous, several times more likely to be generous than a liberal or than a far left citizen. So I don't know what the exact number is, but we had a statistic up. Are you pulling that up now?
Uh-huh.
Okay, perfect. But it just goes to show that obviously capitalism is the most biblical way, but not only that, but from a Christian perspective, capitalism promotes generosity and giving to the poor. And people try to argue that capitalism is the opposite. Capitalism is only benefits the rich and only benefits the upper class, and that's not right in any way.
Yeah, politically conservative people are generally more giving and give more of their time to volunteer. They give more money and they give more volunteer time than liberals. Statistically, National Institute of Health, American Enterprise Institute, those are statistical documents that say there's a reason why. Because not only do we, obviously, we have jobs, we're not on the street protesting.
It's about the values.
It's about the values. We believe that people have innate value. They're created in the image of God. All humans are created equal. And we know that some people have circumstances that they're not able to get a work at a certain point. They lose their job. And those are legitimate circumstances. But for them to say, hey, we're going to give the government money, and that's going to be given out to everybody.
Right, you don't get to make that choice.
I don't get to personally go, hey, I'm going to bless you and I'm going to tell you about Jesus while I'm doing it. Because that takes away the ability for me to minister to someone. That makes the government the middleman. Instead of me doing it through the work of the Spirit in my life, ministering to them. And then hopefully them seeing that and wanting to make a change in their life, go, I want to be able to give to somebody else one day in my life. But if people can assume the government's going to give them welfare, people can assume the government's going to give them free food, free grocery stores, why would they ever go back to work?
And now, obviously, this opens up the conversation of taxes in general, which it's important to note that taxes do have benefit in some way. Of course, it goes to our military that protects us.
Exactly.
And, or other facets of the government that help enforce or protect other rights that we have as American citizens. Right. So there is that for the record. But what we're saying is that aspect of that part of our income that's been being taken from us, not for military protection, not for protecting of rights, but for promoting laziness.
Welfare fraud.
Yes.
There's a portion of every American citizen's income that's going to welfare fraud in this country right now. And they're doing the Trump administration is doing everything they can to cut it out. But unless we as a country can say, hey, welfare fraud is the number one issue, or let's think about it. When we left England over a 3% tax, we currently there's some states that are proposing putting a 50% tax on the rich. And Charlie Kirk said at one point he paid 50% taxes. So that's an astronomical number. That right there is the reason we have America. It's a place where you're not taxed out the wazoo. It's a place where your tax money, when it is given, you do have taxes. It's not going to be raised. It's actually going to be finding ways to be cut. Especially when it's gone too far. Our local Tarrant County, where we live, just cut taxes again. And Brian Harrison tweeted out, this is one of the only counties in the state of Texas that is cutting taxes this year. That's a huge win.
Absolutely.
And our mayor in our specific city, we highly disagree with, but he's doing the work to help cut taxes. Our county judge is doing the work to help cut taxes, and what that does, that eliminates fraud, that eliminates the necessity for government reliance on anybody's part. Ours, those who are lower in the social scale or economic scale, there's a mindset that we must come across as Christians, that is, I need to have a good work ethic, and I need to be personally responsible for my decisions. We've lost that. And I believe that honestly, that's a lot of responsibility in the church. But when it comes to socialism versus capitalism, one breeds personal responsibility, generosity, success materially, success spiritually. Capitalism has created some of the most beneficial missionary structures in society. Having a nonprofit organization, all that, right? You have, Franklin Graham Samaritan's Purse, World Vision, all these ministries that are created in the capitalist system. They were not created under USSR.
Exactly.
So, Sarah, as we close, what would be your one, if anybody in here is questioning socialism versus capitalism, or at all they have any, how would they respond to someone who's promoting socialism they know?
I would sum it up to say that socialism and capitalism never protect your rights. They only take them. And
communism. Socialism and communism.
I'm sorry. So exactly, that's what I meant. Sorry. Socialism and communism only take away your rights. Capitalism promotes them and protects them. as best as possible. Now, of course, there's areas of our government today that works in capitalism that has flaws and needs to be adjusted, and we can absolutely have that conversation. But in the ideal and the principle of capitalism, it always works better, and it is always more biblical, just in value. So that's how I would sum it up. And it's really simple. It's not a hard thing to understand that socialism has literally never worked. Never in history. There's no example, not even one, of a nation where people's rights were protected or they were held as individuals who deserved their freedoms.
Right.
Only capitalism, which is a biblically founded ideal and system, has ever protected rights.
Right, exactly. And that comes back to where we believe our rights are from, and we believe they're from God. And God does not say everyone gets the exact same results at the end. He says that you will end up on one side, eternal life or eternal destruction. And when you are entering into eternal life, even then there's reward, specific reward outlined for specific people. There's least and greatest in the kingdom. We understand that. So socialism is not a biblical idea. Socialism is a demonic idea. It's an idea that everyone should have the same exact outcome. And that's not at all what Scripture presents and not at all what God promotes in His kingdom. So as Christians, we should never be ones to promote socialism. So we hope this episode has been helpful for you, just understanding kind of some of the main talking points of socialism, but also specifically this democratic socialist idea, how it's popping up, and it's either going to pick one way. It's going to revert back to capitalism, or it's going to go all the way to socialism, and then we'll deal with it then. But, it's time. It's time for Christians to start speaking up about these things, addressing these things head on, and we hope we're leading the charge to do so. So, also, we're having a speaking event soon. We will be speaking at our first speaking event, at an event called Freedom Fighters here in DFW area. We'll be speaking, talking a little bit about one of our organizations is trying to do. We're going to have some resources there. We'll hope you'll check it out online. Freedom Fighters as the name of the group. I'm not 100% sure all their contact info if you want to get in touch, but it'd be really cool to see some of you guys there if you've been listening to our podcast or been seeing some of our content online. Again, thank you guys for listening. This was episode 9, I think 9, of the New Athens Project podcast, and we are so excited to just keep workshopping some of these things and getting some more content out there for you guys. Be sure to register to vote if you have not registered to vote. Elections coming around the corner. Y'all have a good day.